Hey Tom, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
It's great to have you back in the Bay Area with us. You are definitely one of my favorite TED Talk speakers, and I'm so honored to be able to talk with you today face to face via Zoom. Before I jump into any of my questions, would you be able to do us the honor to introduce yourself a little bit? Um, where you came from, what are some significant milestones that went in through your life that helped you bring you to where you are today as an investor, an inventor, and just a wonderful thought leader?
Sure, yeah. Um, Lifelong inventor. I'm a named inventor on 75 patents and have probably patented only about 3% of what I've built because mostly had to go do it relative to things that were going to go commercial. Um, you know, so been doing that my entire life, but like expressed through doing all sorts of research work. So I did scientific research in astrophysics. I did engineering research in robotics, sensor fusion, advanced computing architectures, bunch of different areas. And then I went into industry and worked at Microsoft. I was an executive at Yahoo, also senior leader at Google that helped to start the Google X team, where I got to work on the
Yes.
self-driving car, Google Glass, a bunch of things like that. And then after that, I wanted to go use these kind of invention skills and the skills around accelerating innovation and point them not necessarily at just cool new tech that we could make, but at um, at things that we could make that could address major global issues. So things like the um, climate destabilization that's being driven by too many greenhouse gases, or
Mm.
all the other ways that the economy is not compatible with the natural world. So the idea of my current work is basically to use all of the invention and innovation skills, but apply them towards supporting companies that are radically shaking up the industries that are negative to nature. So we can kind of create an economy that both serves humanity and serves nature at the same time.
I love that. All right, so basically, doing what we're constantly doing, but being much more respectful, mindful, and responsible to our environment and our planet, and obviously the world we live in. I love that. Um,
Well, just one little tweak on that, like
yeah.
the actual tagline for our new firm, which is called At One Ventures, but the tagline for our new firm is to help humanity become a net positive to nature. So the
Hmm.
idea is you eventually push for a civilization where the fact that humans on the that are on the fact that humanity is on the planet actually helps nature become healthier every year.
Oh wow. Okay. Okay. What are
It's
some of
really
the
pushing beyond that sense of like, let's stop doing damage or just be more responsible or whatever. It's like we actually do, we are getting a better and better
Mhm,
understanding over time of how natural systems and cycles work, and which
mhm.
activities we do are detrimental to it, and also which activities we do that can be actively additive to it. And if you kind of flip around the design problem, you basically say, no, actually, what if we designed an economy that was not only additive to humans, but was additive to all of nature?
Mm,
it
mhm,
it it kind of puts it like nature, instead of being the on the other side of the table, like a
mhm.
resource we're drawing from. We're kind of like all on the same side, like we're working together because humanity wants to be prosperous and it wants nature to be prosperous at the same time, because that's the most
Mm.
prosperous world we could end up with.
I love that. I love that. Then can you share with us, within obviously confidentiality and understanding, are there any particular projects that At One Ventures is working on that you're especially excited about?
Let's see, I'm wearing the sweatshirt for one of them. This one's called Dendra Systems, and they're basically able to restore ecosystems about 100 times faster, 3 times cheaper than anything we've ever done.
Wow.
And they're already working up at like 10,000 hectare restorations,
Oh
so
my God.
already quite large areas, and they are on a trajectory that they could credibly be restoring 100,000 hectares in a single project, within 18 months. And
That's amazing.
they've already restored ecosystems all around the world, mangroves, tropical rainforests, temperate forests, arid lands like a mixture of grasslands and light tree cover. So they've worked in in lots of different settings on 4 different continents, and
Mhm.
in all those settings, they have dramatically reduced the cost and very dramatically reduced the time to go restore ecosystems.
Fantastic. Okay. Um, I also want to ask you, just if you don't mind, um, I understand that you also had a powerful personal journey that really helped you see the importance of not taking life for granted and making sure that you live every moment to its fullest and not waste any of it. And probably was one reason why I think that you are constantly working 9 hours a day, but you're doing it with things that I think you love and are you passionate about. Um, would you be willing to share with us something that incident you've gone through that really made you appreciate uh, your time here on Earth and not wasting any of the opportunities presented to you?
Sure. I mean, I guess the very short version of it is I effectively died or almost died when I was 29, and the reason that that happened was I was an executive at Yahoo, and
Mhm.
I had been uh, just taking on more and more responsibility because the entire way that I kind of built up my career was just to take more responsibility, learn more, work harder, just kind of push through it. And I think that works fantastic if you're an individual contributor. There's only so much that you would expect a person to be able to do. So, I was always doing more than what you'd expect a single person to be able to do. And that got me a lot of visibility. I also got a lot of great work done. It also, got my name in the mix in terms of like, oh, who should be leading people? And I remember, when I first started out, I like my first team was about 5 people, and that's not too hard from the management perspective. Um, but I had this habit, which was great for my employees in a way, in that, let's say, you were somebody who worked, in my team, and 90% of the job is going, well for you. You're really like locked in, doing a fantastic job of it. 10% of it you're struggling with. Well, a lot of times, like when my employees would come to me with that, I'd be like, you know what? We just got to get the mission done. I'll take on your 10%.
Mm.
And look, when you got 5 people, you grab 10% from this person, five from this person, 10% from that person. It increases your workload a bit, but maybe it goes from 100% to 130%. And that was something I could still handle. But I basically kept that habit going as my team, became 20 people and 50
Oh,
people.
wow.
And yeah, and like when you grab 5% from 50 people, all of a sudden you have, more than any human being can handle. And I did not recognize that this was the case, but I was exhibiting all kinds of stress behaviors. Like I would come in the morning and then fill up like a 24-ounce cup just with ice, and I would just chew on ice in the morning while I was doing my emails and kind of clearing out, lots of things for the day. And which is, by the way, terrible for your teeth. I had great teeth until I did that, so don't do that. If you are tempted to chew ice, take it from me, that will ruin your teeth. But but I had all these stress behaviors to kind of try to manage the stress of taking on the workload of, I don't know, 3 or 4 people. But what was actually happening is that my body was very negatively responding to all that stress. Just like stress can be related to digestive issues and ulcers and all that sort of thing. Then something like that was happening for me in my lower GI tract. And basically, when I was 29 during Christmas break, I was hanging out with my friends, and we're just playing video games like old times, and I was going down the hall to the bathroom, and I like collapsed in the hallway before I could get to the bathroom. And my friends called the ambulance because they couldn't revive me. And what had happened is my lower GI tract actually burst open,
Oh,
and I was
shoot.
doing massive internal bleeding.
Oh, my
Um,
God.
and of course, you don't look like anything's wrong. You just like look like you're collapsed. So the EMTs like picked me up. We got me to the hospital within about 20 minutes. And then they started to check out my vitals, and very quickly it went from, doesn't look like there's anything wrong, to like, oh, this person's about to die. And then they called a lot of people over, and you know, um, sometimes you're losing blood. They'll give you a blood transfusion to kind of stabilize you. I had lost so much that they had to do 4 simultaneous transfusions. And then after that happened, then that was still not enough. They had to immediately do another 4 simultaneous transfusions. Um, and before they started the transfusions, like I knew that stuff was really, really wrong because I could basically feel myself dying. Like when you are almost out of blood, what your body does is it shunts all of the blood to just the heart and the lungs. They said, well, we can give up on literally everything else as long as we're able to go run those things. But some of the things that it gives up in the process is all of your internal organs. So those can fail from lack of oxygen. And also it gives up on your brain, gives up on your brain before your heart and lungs. And and I actually felt that happening to me, you know, in those minutes before the transfusion. I felt my extremities going like, you know, ice cold because all the blood was coming into the core. I felt like effectively my body shutting down. And I kind of knew in a way that I was dying, though it was not confirmed until the next morning when the doctor told me that I was about a minute away from irreversible brain and organ damage, and then
My
shortly
God.
after that you die. Um, so yeah, I basically was about a minute from death, and I got to feel the experience of dying very clearly, and and that there's a whole story around that, which like led to my everything is connected talk. But the most immediate lesson was basically I woke up the next morning, and ultimately they gave me 10 blood transfusions because they gave me a couple more even after those, you know, four simultaneous plus four simultaneous. Um, but I woke up the next morning, you know, most of a human being is liquid. Most of that liquid is blood. And I had most of my blood, you know, switched out over
Right.
the course of the night. And
Right.
I kind of woke up that morning and it's like, I might be more other people than I am myself this morning,
Right.
just by mass, right? Because you're
Right.
mostly liquid and most of that liquid's blood. Um, and I'm only alive right now because of the generosity of like 10 people that I'm never going to be able to meet or thank.
Right.
And there's something about that what was exactly the message that I needed because what's implicit in the message of, oh, when times get tough, just like buckle down, work harder, take more responsibility, that sort of thing, is this implicit sense that the world is not there supporting you, right? That you need to take on more to go support others only. That's the only direction the arrow flows. But when you wake up the next morning and there's 10 people that without which you would already be dead, and you don't even know them, you can't even thank them, then and they not only helped you, like their, you know, their blood, the stuff that their, you know, that their lives created is now in you, like
Mhm.
allowing you to breathe and live. And
Yeah.
there's no kind of deeper sense of support than you can have than you
Of course.
have basically given me the fundamental chance to live.
Right.
And and it made me like reset and reflect a lot about like my model of what a strong leader was and what it meant to do anything in the world, and the ways that we are, you know, constantly relying on each other, but we have this kind of hero mythology around you know, the journey that we must take and all the trials that we must overcome, not realizing that, you know, 99% of your life, you know, is possible and is happening because of the support of others. And
Hmm.
yes, we should be bold and we should push on the 1% that is ours, but like you think about it differently. You don't feel so alone actually when you know that 99% of your life, you know, is comes through it, it's kind of like the blessings and the work of others that have come before or are concurrent to you now.
Wow. That was so powerful. And you're right. Like that life-giving blood came from their body that they generated, the genesis of their bodies, and it now or at that moment in time uh, transferred its life-giving properties to you, right? And kept you alive to go on and do great things. So wow, that is so insightful and so powerful. Thank you for sharing that story, Tom.
Yeah, no problem.
So
Yeah.
so the whole talk of how, and I understand even more now when you talk about the talk of how everything is connected. And I have to ask this question because this is such a timely question. If everything is so connected, which I truly believe it is at this point now, more than ever, um, 2020 and now we're in 2021 was a huge psychological, historical, um, just philosophical, obviously financial, health, everything was just impacted by this one phenomenon. If everything is connected, what kind of ripples do you see that this kind of phenomenon that's happened in 2020, that started in 2020, is obviously still continuing on in 2021? What kind of potential ripples or effects do you see this connecting with everything else in things that you feel like is worthy to mention in this talk that 2020 has basically started as a ripple effect in the pond?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about a pandemic disease is it, it obviously started in one location. There was like a person that was the very first infected. And over the course of like, a little over a year, it's reached 100 million people. And in order for that to happen, humans had to be directly in contact with other humans. It's not like you can put that on a web server and then somebody, like 5,000 miles away gets it. So like that actually just shows you that there is a direct in-person line of connection, between that one person and the 100 million people in less than a year.
Yeah.
And,
Hmm.
I think there's a lot that you could take from that, though it's very highlighted by a pandemic disease because it gives you like this acute, negative response that you're going to remember. But like what's true about that is actually true of all the stuff that we do. We might think like, oh, I'm just dumping some pollution in this one river and it's really just around my town and whatever. And then it rolls out to the ocean and it's affecting fish that people are going to go eat, 20,000 miles away.
Right.
And the more that we just have those concrete examples, because there's basically been a push for consumerism and individuality, as like these dual ideals. And one of them's like, oh, well, consumerism, it's going to go drive the economy and the economy is going to lift all boats and da da da. And I think we are, the breakdown of the economy, in 2020 also made it clear that like the lifting of all boats is definitely not very well distributed.
Uh-huh.
So it's definitely not all boats. So like we should go challenge that notion around like, is consumerism the whole kind of thing? And then around individuality is kind of like held up like oh, when things go amazingly, then you get all these extra choices and agency in life, and then you can strike out and be your own person and not so. But there's something about that that doesn't really acknowledge that you get to be your own person because so many other people are thriving, right? Like those are the situations where a person really gets to be their own person. If you are trying to be your own person and then you're just surrounded by misery, or you end up needing to take care of folks that have been let down by the system, then all of a sudden, like, individuality is, well, basically individuality is not a value that you can go and pursue in the abstract. That and it's also something that might, lead us into a type of illusion around like, hey, well, I made enough money, I got mine, like I'm basically covered. It's like, no, I mean, if you really look at this, you are still, feeling the shocks of this. Now, maybe not as economically, but like not being able to go out and eat at a restaurant or not being able to go, you know, um, watch a movie or see a play or what have you, like, or go out and listen to music, right? Like there's things that start to encroach that make you recognize that the kind of the myth of being separate and this individual with agency and that and holding that as a really high goal, above caring about the co-flourishing of everyone around you, that's misguided as well. So I think there's a bunch of things, and these are more kind of like Western centric sensibilities. Obviously in the US, like individuality and capitalism are very highly regarded. But I'll say like we got to go look at those pretty seriously. Like to the extent that we keep doing them, then we definitely can't keep doing them the way we have been doing.
Right. What are some things that you think that you hope um, from a national and hopefully a global perspective as a global village, using that term, that we've learned going forward into the 2020s that we'll do differently, that we've seen ourselves do for the last several decades the same way over and over again?
Well, I mean, this is still a big open question, but the fact that we had multiple um, relief bills for coronavirus, $2.2 trillion one, Biden's about to propose like a $1.4 trillion one, and then we had like a 800 billion one in between, something like that. Then forever we have been saying that we can't tackle the big problems like climate destabilization. We can't tackle the big problems in the world because it's too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But like all the proposals to go and address those big problems were way cheaper than what we spent on coronavirus this year, and not even necessarily to improve anything. It was basically just like, oh, like you guys are all out of work, like we want to make sure that you don't starve. Like, well, sure, not starving is very valuable to go after, but it's not like the system is like way stronger than it was before. You're just trying to like have it not collapse.
Right.
And like when you think about the sort of budgets that we argued about and all the rationales for why we had to wait a bit longer to go address the big issues in society, then I think that it's going to be harder to make those excuses after we have, in the course of a year, spent 3 trillion or more doing stuff that is not necessarily increasing the fundamentals of human welfare or the economy. Like it is really just preventing a collapse, like I said. Now that said, you can say, well, preventing the collapse, like it would be more expensive if we collapse. For sure, but it would also be way less expensive to build something that was robust,
Yes.
that didn't have that type of possibility of collapse, where collapse wasn't so imminent when something goes wrong for a couple months.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. I think if anything, what I've learned this past year was that we were all living pretty much on almost like I teach my students the three little pigs, right? I think we were all living in a house of straw,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the minute, and as long as there's no wind and no storm, everyone is fine and happy, right? Because there's no reason not to build a stronger house. But the minute something like this comes and finds that Achilles heel that brings the whole straw house down, instead of trying to build another straw house or try to keep the straw from falling, you're right. We should be looking at what a brick house looks like.
Yeah, and it is of course like the hard stuff in how you design the economy, but it's also the soft stuff in terms of like, you know, have we become so individualistic that we don't have people around us that can care for us?
Right. Right.
It's like that is way more of a question of how one envisions like socially what success looks like. And this has
Mm.
been a long-standing trend, but there's like a study that was done that was talking about how many close friends that people have, and like since the 1980s that number has decreased by a half. So
Sure.
like people have half as many close friends now than they did in the 1980s, 1990s. It's like, oh well, yeah, no, I think we all feel it. We feel the social isolation. We feel trying to use social media to kind of like fill in the gap, but that doesn't necessarily create close friendships. Maybe it helps you to like stay in touch with some close friends. But yeah, that kind of is illustrative of a erosion that is happening in terms of um, a really well nourished emotional life.
Right. And so what I'm also getting here and understanding is that this is not a problem that can be solved by money or finance or a quick fix. This is something that we need to, like you said, we have to take a good hard look at our deeper philosophies. What are some fundamental things that if you could share with the audience that you think we need to do, hopefully, at least as a nation, I don't even know if we can do this globally, but at least a nation, to work towards in the next several years, decades, to try to fundamentally shift our understanding of how we've lost some of these basic nurturing values along the way? What are things you think we should start focusing on to get back to the human basics again of being a person?
Yeah, so just to be clear, there are some external things that can be addressed with, smart allocation of capital
Mm-hmm.
and investment and money broadly. And then there are a bunch of internal things, which I think, as you are raising, will certainly not be solved with money, or at least not money alone. Um, when it comes to the things like that, there is a significant kind of breakdown, in being able to go assess where the truth is coming from. And historically, science, journalism, things like this have been the things that we kind of look to say, well, look, there is a way that we can establish scientifically what happens when a virus does this or that,
Mm-hmm.
or journalism wise, like that a event specifically took place or didn't take place,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for a number of reasons that are way too long to get into, then a number of powerful people around the world have been pushing to erode the confidence in things like science, in things like the press and journalism, and so on and so forth. And that is like the natural first step to be able to manipulate people, because you
Right.
kind of take away their ability to see what's true,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can pop in there, and whether it's through social media, which is one avenue that people have been manipulating folks, or whether it's through speeches, or whether it's through in-person stuff, like the most important underlying arc is that kind of erosion of the sources of truth. So like the way to go fight back on this is, um and you want these sorts of things to be fixed quickly, but like in seeing how far things have gone askew, then you just got to presume it's going to take a generation.
Right.
And that generation is a generation, we've already pushed to say, oh, there should be more people in STEM careers or STEAM careers. That's great. Absolutely more people with good literacy and numeracy, and a foundation in science, like absolutely helps a good amount on the science part of it. On the journalism part of it, yeah, we probably need to go adjust some things in terms of the business model of journalism, because the we keep rewarding the organizations that spread lies because they get the ratings and they get the views and clicks and all that sort of thing. So like that's basically like a lie generating machine. And whether you point at the social media companies as being like the root of all the problem, or you point at the business model of modern media as the root of all problem, or you can pin it on the people too. It's like, oh, we keep on clicking on those things.
Yeah.
It almost doesn't matter exactly what the root is. Like we can identify that the dynamic overall is creating confusion and misery, and that we got to go in and stop the dynamic overall. And around truth, man, this is getting into a whole kind of mini lecture, but like, you know, I think people need to understand that there's three different types of truth. So there are scientific truths about the natural world. And you can tell these types of truth because they were true even before humans were around,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like the laws of physics, electromagnetism, like all of biology. These are things that worked away even before, worked the way that they do even before humans were around. Ecosystems, all that kind of thing. And there's a entire set of things that you can go verify about the world that fit into that first sensibility of truth, which are resolvable via scientific truth. Then there's a second type of truth, which is social truth, and this has a lot more to do with like consensus. Is Madonna or Prince like the best pop star in the whole world? In history, it's like, well, that would be a social truth. Like if you said it was, Prince, or you said it was Madonna, it's because just a bunch of people said, like, oh, we really like that music, therefore, this is the queen of pop, and this is, I guess Prince would be the prince of pop. Who knows, right? So
Right.
so like so something like that is true, but it's true because of consensus.
Okay.
It's not absolutely true, like, in all of history, there has never been a musician more skillful than those two musicians. It's like, no, there's lots of musicians with all these different skills, but if the majority of the populace is kind of agreeing on a thing, then then it works well enough for social truth. And then there is the third type of truth, which is personal truth.
Okay.
And personal truth are things like, a person grows up in a conservative household, but maybe they're queer, and they kind
Okay.
of personally know that that's the case. And their local social truth might be like, no, that's not allowed. Like, our community isn't like that, or in our church we don't allow that, or
Right.
in our religion we don't allow that. Um, and this is where the rub comes in, right? It's basically like, and personal truths, the only person that can go verify a personal truth is that person. Because, like, you know, even if you had a social consensus that said, oh, we don't think so and so is gay, it's like, it doesn't matter. It's like, only that person can go verify that that's their personal truth. And like most of the problems that we're having about truth come at the collision points between those three different types of truth. And what,
See.
right. So now remember, the scientific type of truth works with or without human beings. Like that one's really, really stable. And that's the one that I spend most time on in my career. And because of it, I have felt more comfortable in these times because there is a way for me to go figure out, at least scientifically, what is true. But like a lot of times people will go and try to muddle the scientific with the social, where it's like, well, a lot of people are really concerned about so and so, or people are really concerned that the virus didn't come from animals that came from this other thing. It's like, well, that's the thing that you can actually just scientifically establish. You don't try to go and put it up to an appeal to social truth that said,
Right.
if enough people like this post, then it must be a real thing that's happening. And and because people don't have that clarity of distinction, then it becomes, conspiracy theories abound all over the place. Because they're like, oh man, well, if 3 million people like this post, then it probably is true, right? And that's them using their social truth, you know, um, monitoring system, as opposed to understanding that something like a virus is primarily governed by scientific truth.
Hmm. Hmm.
So first off, you should be able to identify what type of truth is applicable here. And secondly, if there is a conflict, then you need to ask yourself, well, okay, where did the source of the conflict come from? Because what is mostly happening in the modern day is powerful leaders and people that are looking to take down existing systems of organization, uh, for their own gain, are are basically appealing to social truth to go overwrite personal truth and overwrite scientific truth.
Hmm.
That's mainly the vector of damage that's happening here.
I can, I can, I can, I can understand that. I can totally see how that is happening. And I can literally, and it's been so prevalent, obviously, in this past year. Um, and I knew this was going to happen. We're literally out of time at this point. I knew I could talk with you all day on just everything, but this is pretty much approaching the last minute. Do you have anything that you want to share with our viewers before we close out? Any last words of wisdom that you want to give them as we go forward in 2021 right now?
There's a lot of things that are worth doing to build a better world. And what I would advise folks to do is, as much as possible, get your hands, directly on it. And because a lot of folks are like, oh, I really care about so and so, but I don't really know what to do. And in that case, it's like, call up the organizations that are getting their hands directly on it and see how you can be helpful, even in the smallest ways. And because I feel like a lot of folks, either give up the power and they basically say, well, if only I could elect the right person, or if enough people saw my post, or if I could earn enough money in my career so that afterwards I could retire and give a little money to this stuff, then I might be able to go help with these problems. And I'm just going to say, we don't necessarily have the time, and those problems are longing for your skills.
Right.
And when I left Google to start working on social and environmental good, I went to a bunch of villages where people live on less than $2 a day. I went to the places where the ice cabs were calving and the palm, oil plantations were coming up, after mass deforestation. And it's like, and it actually turned out that there were a bunch of useful things that I could do and that I did do. Yeah, but there was no way for me to know that I could be useful or not before actually just saying like, let's just roll up the sleeves and give it a shot. I don't even know if I can be useful or how I can be useful, but let me just get roughly in the territory, try to listen and learn from the people that are making a difference, and then roll up the sleeves and pitch in the ways that I can. And I think something like that goes and pushes against that malaise and that sense of powerlessness
Mm.
that people are struggling with. Like the attraction to conspiracy theories is part of the sense of trying to get a little bit of control and power back from a situation that seems to be spinning out of control. But another way to get control and power back is to be able to directly work on, you know, fixing or taking care of the things that really matter to you. So that's what I would advise. If there's anything that really matters to you, or it breaks your heart that the world works in a particular way, get directly involved, even if it was for 4 hours a week. Get directly involved with organizations or people that are concretely working on it, not just talking about it or trying to do a social media campaign about it. Like get into the real, like that actual human beings are clearly being helped on the other side, or actual organisms in nature are being actively helped on the other side. Like make sure that the doing is happening and not just the talking, and stay around the organizations where they have more doing than talking.
I love that. Thank you so much again for all your words of wisdom, Tom. I always learn so much every time I spend time with you. I hope I get a chance to meet you sometime in person this year, or at the very latest, the beginning of next year. But until then, please take care of yourself, your family, and I will hopefully talk with you again soon. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Take care, Tom. Bye bye.